Hey guys, welcome back to YOCF In The Wild. Every single week on Sundays we release a video that is more of like a teaching instead of just us having our quarantine quiet time or our YOCF youth group meetings throughout the week, or life groups if you're in high school. So every single week we have been going through this passage in Hebrews 11 known as the Hall of Faith. And so we take a character out of there, do a character study to see what's their story about, who are they, why have they earned themselves a position in this place. And so this week we're going to be looking at Abraham. I think most people who at least have grown up in the church know who Abraham is, Father Abraham. There's lots of songs about him. He's well known. He's a very important character in Genesis. And so Abraham is cool in that he is mentioned. Two different key parts of his story are mentioned in this passage. And so he's the husband of Sarah. And so we did Sarah a couple weeks ago. Ryan talked about her and why she earned a position in the Hall of Faith. So their stories are interwoven, but Abraham is somebody who God made a promise to back in Genesis. And so he's mentioned in Hebrews 11:8. We'll start there and we'll read it out. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and set out for a place that he was going to receive as an inheritance. He went out even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he stayed as a foreigner in the land of promise, living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, co-heirs of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And so it goes on into more of his story and how it's more interconnected to Sarah, but it's brought back up again. In verse 17, it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. This is his son, by the way. He received the promise, and yet he was offering this, his one and only son, the one to whom it had been said, your offspring will be called through Isaac. He considered God to be able even to raise someone from the dead. Therefore, he received him back figuratively and speaking. So this story is super intense. There's a lot of promises that are made from God to Abraham, and a lot of kind of twists and turns as to how Abraham tried to get there, and how Isaac and his son's life plays into how Abraham could be seen as faithful. And so we're going to go look back at Genesis 12 through 22 is the whole story of where Abraham's involvement in Genesis is really there. So take a moment. I would recommend looking in Genesis 12 and maybe skim over it. If you guys haven't read Abraham's story, stop and read his story. And so that might be a little bit more chunkier, but at least skim through Genesis 12 and 21 through 22. So let's give it a moment. Okay, so hopefully you guys have stopped, paused, and read that. It's going to be helpful for context. And so Abraham and his story, he is an Israelite, and God comes to him and basically tells him, you're going to be the father of many people and tons of nations. And I know that Ryan kind of went over this when he talked about Sarah, but so if you guys remember back, I'm just going to do a little recap. He was promised that he was going to have a lot of kids. He was old, didn't have any children. He was like, God, you're so funny. That is totally not going to happen because I don't even have any kids and I'm old. And so it not only is promised to him once, but it's promised to him 2 times. And so what's so important about this story, of what I love about it, is that it is so evident that God is faithful in his promises, because he promises something like this to Abraham, who at the time was probably like, there is no way I'm going to have a son with my wife, Sarah, and all the things that I'm going to do, having multiple children that extend out, and I'm going to be the father of a nation. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so that God fully fulfills that when we see that with Isaac. And so we'll talk more about Isaac's part and how he plays into it, since Sarah kind of overlaps with a lot of Abraham's faithfulness. And so with Isaac, he later on, once Isaac is a young boy, an an angel comes to Abraham and tells him that he has to sacrifice Isaac and that God will still provide. And so that in itself is just crazy, a crazy thing for us to think about, that God has promised Abraham a son and that he's going to be the father of many nations, and that there's going to be nations that come specifically through Isaac. He says that, and then he's asked to sacrifice him. And so it's definitely heavy and a hard thing to think of, like, why would God ask Abraham to do something like that? As we see, Abraham faithfully goes and he takes his son up onto the mountain to go and sacrifice him, despite being promised that he is going to be the father of a huge and important, impactful nation in the story of God, because this is where the Israelites really stem from. And so God goes and tells him to take his son up to be sacrificed. Abraham follows through. Isaac is along with him, kind of like, Dad, what's going on? He goes and he sets them all up. He's about to sacrifice him, and he doesn't do it because an angel stops him and says that there is a other animal in the thicket that he could go and sacrifice instead of his son. But his faithfulness was shown, that he was willing to do something that is so crazy hard. I mean, but this is a question I want you guys to think about, talk about with other people. Has there ever been something in your life that you guys have had to sacrifice? And what was that? Like, what did that look like? Was it hard for you guys to do that? Was it easy? Was it something that you didn't do? Did you know you should have sacrificed something, but you didn't do it? And what were the effects of that? How did that make you guys feel? So take a moment, think about that. What have you had to sacrifice in your life? And if you have sacrificed anything, how did that feel? What did it look like? And if you didn't do it, why not? And what were the other ramifications for not sacrificing it? So take a moment, think about that. Okay, so coming back to it, I hope that that is something that you guys have had to think about. I mean, God calls us to sacrifice all the time, because he had the ultimate sacrifice by giving his son. And so this is such a reflection of that Abraham was willing to give his son, just like how God is willing to give his son Jesus, and that he sacrificed himself, and that he came and was able to bring redemption. And so God is always going to have a way out of these things, and he's always going to help us. And whether that's you don't have to sacrifice something or you do have to, God is going to be with you through it. And especially knowing that he is a fulfiller of his promises, and he keeps them and holds them and takes them seriously. I know that promises can be really hard if we feel like they are not kept or broken. And so I'm sure there have been some of you guys that have felt like, I had a promise that was broken, and it's really hard for me to trust, and it is hard for me to trust God. And so I encourage you guys to read the story and really see the blessing that comes with trusting God, that whatever he promises, he's going to fulfill, and that he is going to be in control of everything going on. And so it's definitely, I think, a really good passage for us to think about during this time of what does it look like in our world of what we are giving up. We're giving up so much freedom, it feels like, to make sure that other people are staying safe right now, and to make sure that we can do our part in keeping not just ourselves healthy, but other people healthy. And it can be hard. It's really hard to sacrifice that sometimes. Like, believe me, I wish I could see all of you, see my friends, see some of my family. It's hard not being able to go out and just do whatever we want. But we have to know that God's going to be faithful through what we sacrifice, and that our diligence to follow him and trust that he knows what's going on, that he's in control of everything going on in our world, is really important for us to remember. So I just want to encourage you guys to continue to consider what it was like for Abraham to give up something so precious to him, like his son, his one and only son, and how hard that would have been. And so think about that, meditate on it for a little bit, pray about it, of like, God, is there something like that you really want me to give up for me to be able to fully follow you and trust you in this time. That might be hard. It might be something that is really stressful to think about, but your leaders are here for you. Me and Ryan are here for you. Your parents are here for you. And talk about it. Talk about the things that you feel like you need to be giving up, and it's okay to struggle in it. Clearly, Abraham was not just like, oh, okay, let's go. I'm going to take my son up there. He sat through years and years and years of anguish over the fact that he was wanting a child and he wasn't getting one, even though God had promised him. And then to finally get one and be told that he has to give him up and sacrifice him. It's hard. It's really hard. But the thing is we can all be faithful to God in the way that our actions are shown by what we're willing to give to him. And that's not saying that you have to be like this person that has some minimalist that doesn't have anything, has no joy or happiness. That's not what God asks from us at all. Like, he wants us to continuously be finding joy in our lives with him, and walking with God is joyful, but it can be difficult. And so I hope that this is a passage that encourages you guys to see that there is an end to anguish and frustration and waiting and being patient, but it just takes us to trust God through all of that time. And even here we can see that Abraham was not always the most trustful. He tried to have a child with another woman and do things in his own way, but when we follow God faithfully in the way that he wants us to be doing it in his will and his timing, in the way that he has planned it out to be, it is so much better than what we could have ever planned. So I just praying for you guys. I love you guys. I hope that this is an encouraging passage to remind you guys that you're not alone in sacrificing things, and that it is part of walking with God for us to be giving things up for the greater good and for things that we might not understand in these moments, but we have to be able to trust that God has everything in control. Okay, love you guys. See you guys next week. Bye.